Chapter 3, Middle English Literature. Fabliau, Lyric, Dream, Allegory, Ballad. The courtly French romance, as we have seen, drew its ideals partly from feudal notions of service and honor. Sometimes, as in many of the Arthurian stories, oddly combined with more specifically Christian virtues. And when it was rendered into English, much of the courtliness was lost in interest centered on the physical adventure. Not all medieval French narrative was perlite, however. From France also came a type of short narrative poem, realistic humorous, often coarse, known as the Fabliau, and Fabliau and romance existed side by side. The Fabliau is associated with the new middle classes who slowly grew in importance as the feudal system developed only to decay. If romance begins in France as the entertainment of a feudal aristocracy, Fabliau is the product of the class which was eventually to destroy feudalism. The development of a money economy out of a natural economy, hastened both by the commutation of different kinds of feudal service to money payments and the growth of towns with their trading communities, gradually took away the very basis of the feudal system by encouraging the growth of a class which had no place in it. This new class, town dwellers who carried on commercial activity of one kind or another, traders their food and their raw materials by selling to the peasants the goods they manufactured, were less impressed by courtly notions of love and honor than the more conservative feudal landowners, realistic iconoclastic, priding themselves on knowing life as it really is and on refusing to look at it through the rose-colored spectacles of sentimental idealists. They sponsored a boisterous, satirical kind of narrative which was, as it were, the antitype of the idealizing vision of courtly knight or pious churchman. This middle-class challenge of the knightly ideal was but one phase of a significant movement in the history of European culture. The heroic age, reflected in Germanic epic, had given way to the feudal age with its own concept of the hero. When a more commercial civilization develops, the whole possibility of heroism in the modern world is re-examined. We are approaching Don Quixote, the knightly hero's fool, and Don Quixote, who though a fool is also in an oblique way admirable, is a sign on the road which in England comes at last to Robinson Crusoe, the hero's prudential merchant who, even when cast away on a desert island, spends his time recreating as best he can the urban business world he left behind him. When prudence and self-interest become the chief motive power of the hero, a reaction sets in. Led by those who deplore the loss of the hero, a reaction sets in, led by those who deplore the loss of the crowded hour of gloriousum life. Prudential morality is examined ironically, as in Fielding of Thackeray, or is reluctantly conceded to be a condition of progress by a novelist such as Scott, who in his best novels weighs the competing claims of commercial progress and heroic tradition of Bailey, Nicol-Jarvie and Rob Rory, to conclude that while the future lies with the former, the latter is more attractive and its loss a bitter price to pay for material advancement. The fate of the hero in English literature will emerge more clearly in subsequent pages of this history. Here we pause to remark only that the Fabliau represents the first real challenge in European literature to the notion of heroic idealism as a way of life, and that challenge can be traced in its influential course from Cervantes to Evelyn Waugh. Fabliaux are found in France in the 12th and 13th centuries but are rare in England before 1400. They apparently originated in northern France. There are many types. Some are indecent stories of town life whose only point is their indecency, others are humorous, satiric tales of intrigue, others again, like the Roman the Renard cycle, are animal stories, also generally humorous and satiric in tone. Some are made into awful warning or otherwise turned into exemplar. Example, for the use of preachers, the Gesta Romanorum, of which we have an early 15th century English version, is a collection of such exemplar moralized tales for the enlivening of sermons, such as Chaucer's Pardoners' Tales. In Middle English literature, strangely enough, there are very few individual Fabliaux, though French literature abounds in them. The only English fabliau that has survived by itself is Dame Sirit, a low tale of how a merchant's wife is persuaded by a trick to allow a clerk to make love to her in her husband's absence. Yet reference to and warning against such stories in contemporary religious literature make clear that they were common in medieval England. Presumably, however, being a popular rather than a courtly form of literature, they were not often written down. The clergy would have had no interest in them except in their moralized form. And the clergy were the guardians of the written word throughout the Middle Ages. We do find the Fabliau, however, in Chaucer, who put stories of this kind into the mouths of the merchant, the miller, the reeve, the shipman and the summoner in his Canterbury Tales. Another popular medieval literary form, indeed a popular form in most ages and civilizations, is the fable, which came to the Middle Ages from both Greek and Indian sources. The fable is a short story in which animals, acting more or less as human beings, behave in such a way as to illustrate a simple moral. Beast tales represent a very widespread kind of popular literature, and the fable development out of the beast tale in much the same way as the exemplum develop out of the fabliau. In spite of the popularity of the fable in the medieval England, especially in the 12th and 13th centuries, no Middle English collection of fable exists. Books of fables in French and Latin survive, but there are only a handful of extant English fables from before Chaucer, and each of these is found as part of a longer work too, The Owl and the Nightingale. Beast tales were also adapted for satirical purpose. By having animals act as men, it was easy to satirize human follies and vices. The presentation of men as animals being itself an implicit criticism of man's claim to superiority over the brutes. These stories about animals varied considerably in tone. Some are substantially fabliau with the characters animals instead of men, others are more purely satires. Others again are simply entertaining stories about the cunning or resourcefulness or misadventures of animals.